The shot rang out across the canyon just as Logan Quinn's hand reached for the door of the trading post, and he spun on his heel with reflexes honed by years of surviving alone in the high country. A woman's scream followed, then the thunder of hooves retreating fast toward the mesa. Logan's massive frame was already moving before his mind caught up, his buckskin-clad legs eating up the distance to where a figure lay crumpled in the dust of Aztec, New Mexico's Main Street. It was September of 1878, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the small town nestled in the San Juan River Valley. Logan dropped to his knees beside the fallen woman, his calloused hands already checking for the wound. She was breathing, conscious, her green eyes blazing with fury rather than fear, as she clutched her left shoulder where blood seeped through the fabric of her plain traveling dress. "Those bastards got my saddlebag," she hissed through gritted teeth, trying to sit up. Logan pressed her gently but firmly back down, his long dark hair falling forward as he bent to examine the wound more closely. "Easy now," he said, his voice a deep rumble that had startled more than one man who thought a grizzly was nearby. "You have been shot. Lie still or you will bleed more." "I know I have been shot," she snapped, though her face had gone pale. "I was there when it happened. Those riders took my bag and everything in it." Logan pulled his knife from his belt and cut away the sleeve of her dress without ceremony, exposing the wound. The bullet had passed clean through the fleshy part of her shoulder, missing bone and major vessels. Lucky, but it still needed tending, and quickly. "Can you walk?" he asked, already sliding one arm beneath her shoulders and the other under her knees. He did not wait for her answer, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all, which was not true because she was a full-grown woman of substantial height herself. But Logan Quinn had spent the last 8 years in the mountains since mustering out of the army in 1870, trapping and hunting and hauling elk carcasses over his shoulders. His arms were thick with muscle, his chest broad as a barrel, and his legs like tree trunks. "Put me down," the woman protested, but her voice had weakened. "I can walk perfectly well." "You were about to faint," Logan said matter-of-factly, carrying her toward the doctor's office at the end of the street. A small crowd had gathered, but they parted before him like water before the prow of a ship. Logan Quinn was known in these parts, though he rarely came down from his cabin in the mountains except when he needed supplies or had pelts to trade. People gave him a wide berth, not out of fear exactly, but out of respect for a man who clearly preferred his own company and the company of the wilderness. The doctor, an older man named Pierce, was already opening his door, having heard the commotion. Bring her in," he said, ushering Logan through to the examination room. "Set her on the table there." Logan laid the woman down carefully, and she immediately tried to sit up again, pushing at his chest with her good hand. Her palm landed against solid muscle, and for a moment their eyes met. Hers were the color of new pine needles, sharp and assessing. His were dark brown, almost black, set deep under heavy brows in a face weathered by sun and wind and years of hard living. "Thank you," she said stiffly. "I can manage from here." "You are welcome," Logan replied, stepping back, but he did not leave, standing instead with his arms crossed over his chest, watching as Dr. Pierce began cleaning the wound. The woman bit down on a leather strap the doctor offered, and Logan saw tears spring to her eyes, though she did not cry out. "Tough." He liked that. "What is your name?" Logan asked when the doctor paused to prepare his needle and thread. "Grace Sutton," she said, removing the strap from her mouth. She took a shaky breath. "And you are?" "Logan Quinn." Recognition flickered across her face, though he could not imagine why. He was nobody of importance, just a mountain man who kept to himself and bothered no one. "Quinn," she repeated slowly. "Were you in the army? Fort Union, maybe? Or Fort Defiance?" Logan felt his jaw tighten. He did not like talking about his army days. They had not been good years, though they had taught him skills that kept him alive now. "Fort Union, long time ago. I mustered out in 70. "What company?" Grace asked, and there was an intensity to her gaze now that made Logan uncomfortable. "3rd Infantry. Why does it matter?" Grace opened her mouth to answer, but Dr. Pierce chose that moment to begin stitching, and whatever she had been about to say turned into a muffled groan. Logan found himself moving forward instinctively, offering his hand. She grabbed it without hesitation, squeezing hard enough that he felt the bones grind together. He did not flinch. The stitching took 20 minutes. Grace did not pass out, though Logan could see the tremendous effort it cost her to remain conscious. When it was finally done and the doctor was wrapping her shoulder in clean bandages, Logan gently extracted his hand from hers. Her grip had left deep marks in his skin. You will need to rest for several days, Dr. Pierce said firmly. No riding, no lifting anything with that arm. The wound is clean, but infection is always a risk. I want to see you again tomorrow to check it. I am staying at the hotel, Grace said, her voice hoarse. I can manage. Can you? Logan asked skeptically. Can you dress yourself with one arm? Can you manage your hair, your boots? Grace's cheeks flushed. That is none of your concern, Mr. Quinn. It is my concern when I just carried you bleeding through the street, Logan said bluntly. The hotel has no one to help you with such things. My cabin is 2 miles up in the foothills. It is clean, private, and I have experience with wounds. You can stay there until you are healed enough to travel. Absolutely not, Grace said immediately. I do not know you. I am not going to go off into the wilderness with a strange man. Then you are foolish, Logan said without heat, but it is your choice. Dr. Pierce cleared his throat. Actually, Miss Sutton, Mr. Quinn's offer is not unreasonable. The hotel is, shall we say, not the cleanest establishment, and you will need help. I could ask Mrs. Henderson if she has room, but she already has her 3 grandchildren staying with her since her daughter passed. Grace looked between them, frustration clear on her face. Finally, she sighed. Fine, but only until I can manage on my own, which will be very soon. Fine, Logan echoed. He paid Dr. Pierce for his services, waving away the man's protests, and then looked down at Grace. Can you walk now, or do I need to carry you again? I can walk, Grace said firmly, sliding off the examination table. She swayed immediately, and Logan caught her around the waist with one arm, steadying her. She was tall, he realized, the top of her hair reaching his shoulder. Most women barely came to his chest. You are a terrible liar, he observed, and you are insufferably stubborn, she shot back. But she leaned against him as they made their slow way out of the doctor's office. The walk to where Logan had left his horse took another 10 minutes. The big roan stallion, 17 hands if he was an inch, stood patiently where Logan had ground tied him. Logan lifted Grace into the saddle, and she gasped at the movement but did not protest. He swung up behind her, one arm around her waist to hold her steady. My things, Grace said suddenly. At the hotel. My trunk and my other bag. I will get them, Logan said. He turned the roan toward the hotel, and within another 15 minutes, he had collected Grace's belongings and tied them securely behind the saddle. The trunk was heavy, filled with more than just clothes. Books, from the weight of it, and something else that clinked metallically. None of his business. The ride up to his cabin was slow, and Logan could feel Grace fighting to stay upright in front of him. She had lost blood, been through a shock, and the pain must have been considerable despite the laudanum Dr. Pierce had given her. But she did not complain, and Logan found himself respecting her more with each passing minute. His cabin came into view as they crested a small rise. It was larger than most mountain retreats, a solid structure of logs chinked tight against the winter cold, with a stone chimney and real glass windows that had cost him 2 seasons' worth of pelts. The door was thick oak, and inside Logan kept his home as neat and organized as any military barracks. Here we are, he said, dismounting and then reaching up for Grace. She came down into his arms, and this time she did not protest when he carried her inside. He set her on his bed, the only bed in the single-room cabin, and immediately set about building up the fire in the hearth. Where will you sleep? Grace asked, looking around the cabin with obvious curiosity. It was clean, as he had promised, with supplies neatly stacked on shelves, his rifle and various tools hung on the walls, and a small table with 2 chairs near the hearth. I have blankets, Logan said. I will sleep on the floor. I have done worse. Grace was silent for a moment. Then she said quietly, Thank you for helping me. You did not have to. Logan shrugged his massive shoulders. Yes, I did. What kind of man would I be if I left a wounded woman in the street? Many men would, Grace said. Trust me on that. There was something in her voice that made Logan look at her more closely. She had an interesting face, not classically beautiful but striking, with high cheekbones and a straight nose, and a mouth that looked like it was used to giving orders. Her dark blonde hair was coming loose from its pins, falling around her shoulders in waves. She was perhaps 26 or 27, he guessed, old enough to have lived, to have seen things. Are you hungry? He asked. I have stew from last night, venison. Yes, Grace admitted. I have not eaten since breakfast. Logan ladled out 2 bowls of stew and brought them to the table, then helped Grace stand and walk over. She sat down heavily, and he noticed she was trembling slightly. Shock, probably. Finally setting in now that the immediate crisis was past, they ate in silence for a while. The stew was good, rich with meat and vegetables Logan had traded for in town. Grace ate slowly but steadily, and color gradually returned to her face. "You asked about my army service," Logan said finally, not sure why he was bringing it up, but somehow wanting to know why she had asked. "Why?" Grace set down her spoon and met his eyes. "Because I was in the army too." Logan stared at her. "Women cannot be in the army." "Not officially, no," Grace said. "But during the war I disguised myself as a man and enlisted. I served for 4 years before I was discovered. By then, I had risen to the rank of captain." Logan's mind reeled. He had heard stories, of course, of women who had passed as men to fight in the war between the states. But to meet one, to have one sitting at his table. "Which army?" he asked carefully. "Union," Grace said. "I fought at Shiloh, Vicksburg, Chattanooga. I was at Appomattox when Lee surrendered." She paused. "And after the war I stayed with my unit. We were sent west to Fort Union in '68. I served there for 2 years before someone figured out what I was, and I was dishonorably discharged." "Fort Union," Logan repeated. "'68 to '70. I was there. I was a private in the 3rd Infantry." "I know," Grace said softly. "I remember you. You were one of my men." Logan felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He searched his memory, thinking back to those years at Fort Union. There had been a Captain Sutton, he remembered now. Everyone had called him GS or just Sutton. Quiet, competent, fair. One of the better officers Logan had served under, which was saying something because most of them had been incompetent blowhards. "You," he said slowly. "You were Captain Sutton." "I was. You had a beard. False. Made from horsehair and spirit gum." It itched abominably. Logan sat back in his chair, trying to reconcile the memory of Captain Sutton with the woman before him. It seemed impossible, but looking at her now, he could see it. The set of her shoulders, the way she held herself, the tone of command in her voice even when injured. "Why?" he asked. "Why disguise yourself and join the army?" Grace's face hardened. "Because my brother was killed at Bull Run, and my father died of grief 6 months later, and I had no one and nothing left. Because I wanted to fight for something bigger than myself. Because I was good at it, and I wanted to prove that a woman could be just as good a soldier as any man." "You were better than most," Logan said honestly. "You kept us alive at that skirmish with the Ute. You were calm under fire. Smart." "Thank you," Grace said, and he could see the words meant something to her. "I tried my best." "What happened after you were discharged?" Grace's expression turned bleak. "I drifted for a while. Worked as a scout for the army as a civilian, which they allowed because they needed good scouts and did not care what I was as long as I could do the job. I did that for 5 years. But last year, the officer I was working under started making advances. When I refused him, he made sure I could not get work with any of the forts. So I have been trying to make my way as a guide for wagon trains and survey expeditions. It pays poorly, and men do not like taking orders from a woman. The saddlebag that was stolen today had all my money in it. Everything I have earned over the last 6 months. $400. Logan let out a low whistle. $400 was a fortune. He lived on less than $50 a year. "Can you describe the men who shot you?" "3 of them," Grace said immediately. "One was tall and thin, wearing a black hat with a silver band. Another was shorter, stocky, with a red bandana. The third had a scar across his cheek. They were riding toward the Largo Canyon when they left." Logan nodded slowly. "I know where that is. I will go after them tomorrow." "You will do no such thing," Grace said sharply. 3 armed men against 1? That is suicide." "I have dealt with worse odds," Logan said, "and I know that country better than any man alive. I will get your money back." "Why?" Grace asked, leaning forward. "Why would you risk yourself for money that is not even yours?" Logan was silent for a long moment. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said finally. "And because you were a good officer, you looked after your men. That matters." Grace's eyes shimmered and she blinked hard. "You do not owe me anything, Logan. That was a long time ago." "Some debts do not expire," Logan said. He stood and began clearing the table. "You should rest now. You need sleep to heal." Grace did not argue, which told Logan how exhausted she truly was. He helped her back to the bed and pulled a blanket over her. She was asleep within minutes, her breathing deep, and even Logan stood watching her for a moment in the firelight. Captain Grace Sutton, his former commanding officer. The woman he had just invited into his home, into his private sanctuary where no one else had ever been. He shook his head and went to prepare his bedroll by the fire. Tomorrow he would track the men who had shot her. Tonight, he would keep watch and make sure she was safe. The night passed quietly. Logan dozed lightly, as he always did, waking at every small sound. Grace slept heavily, the laudanum and exhaustion keeping her under. When dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Logan rose and set about making breakfast. The smell of coffee and frying bacon woke Grace. She sat up slowly, wincing at the pull of her injured shoulder, and looked around with momentary confusion before memory clearly returned. "How do you feel?" Logan asked, bringing her a cup of coffee. "Sore," Grace admitted, "but better than last night." She accepted the coffee gratefully and took a long sip. "This is good." "I pay extra for good coffee beans," Logan said. "Some things are worth the cost." He brought over a plate with bacon, eggs from the chickens he kept in a small coop outside, and thick slices of bread. They ate together as the sun rose higher, and Logan explained his plan for tracking the thieves. "I am going with you," Grace said immediately. "You are injured." "I can ride," Grace insisted, "and I can shoot." "You said yourself, 3 against 1 is poor odds. 3 against 2 is better." "Not when one of the two is recovering from a gunshot wound," Logan said flatly. "You will stay here and rest." Grace's jaw set in a stubborn line. "I am not some helpless female who needs to be protected and told what to do, Logan Quinn. I was a captain, you were a private. I outranked you, and we are not in the army anymore," Logan said, meeting her gaze steadily. "You are injured and you will slow me down. That is not an insult, that is a fact." They stared at each other for a long moment, neither willing to back down. Finally, Grace looked away. "Fine," she said tightly, "but if you get yourself killed, I am going to be very angry." Logan felt his mouth twitch in what might have been a smile. Noted. He spent the next hour preparing for the journey. He checked his rifle, his revolver, his knife. He packed supplies and saddled his horse. Grace watched from the doorway, leaning against the frame, and Logan could feel her frustration radiating across the space between them. "I will be back by tomorrow night," he said, swinging into the saddle. "There is food in the cabin. The rifle above the door is loaded. Do not open the door for anyone but me." "Be careful," Grace said, and there was genuine worry in her voice. Logan nodded and turned his horse toward Largo Canyon. The trail was not difficult to follow. 3 horses, one of them carrying extra weight from the stolen saddlebag, left clear tracks in the dusty soil. Logan followed them at a steady pace, his eyes constantly scanning the terrain ahead and to the sides. This was Apache country, though the Apache had been mostly pushed onto reservations by now. Mostly, but not entirely. The tracks led deep into Largo Canyon, a maze of red rock walls and narrow passages. Logan dismounted and led his horse on foot, moving silently through the landscape. He had learned tracking from a Ute elder who had befriended him in his first winter in the mountains, and he had learned stealth from 8 years of hunting game that could smell or hear a man from a mile away. He found the thieves' camp in late afternoon, tucked into a sheltered alcove where a small spring provided water. Logan watched from a rocky outcrop above, studying the men. They matched Grace's descriptions perfectly. They were cooking something over a fire, passing a bottle between them, clearly not expecting anyone to follow them this far into the wilderness. Logan waited until dusk, until the men had eaten and drunk enough to be drowsy and careless. Then he moved. He came down from the rocks like a ghost, his rifle in his hands. The first man never knew what hit him. Logan struck him across the back of the head with the rifle butt, and he dropped like a stone. The second man was reaching for his gun when Logan kicked it away and leveled the rifle at his face. "Do not move," Logan said quietly. The third man, the one with the scar, was faster. He grabbed his gun and fired, but Logan had already dropped and rolled. The bullet whined off the rock where his head had been. Logan came up on one knee and fired once. The man with the scar screamed and grabbed his leg, his gun falling from his hand. "Next one goes through your head," Logan said, working the lever action to chamber another round. "Your choice." The man with the red bandana raised his hand slowly. "We do not want trouble, mister." "Then you should not have shot a woman and stolen her money," Logan said. He gestured with the rifle. "The saddlebag. Where is it?" The man with the bandana jerked his head toward a pile of gear near the fire. Logan moved carefully, keeping the rifle trained on them, and found Grace's saddlebag. It was still heavy with coins and paper money. He slung it over his shoulder. "You are making a mistake," the man with the scar said through gritted teeth, clutching his bleeding leg. "We ride with the Garrett gang. They will hunt you down." "The Garrett gang," Logan said thoughtfully. "That would be Cal Garrett, wanted for robbery and murder in 3 territories. There is a $500 bounty on him, if I recall correctly." The man paled, realizing his mistake. "Where is your camp?" Logan asked. "Go to hell," the man spat. Logan shrugged. "Fine, I will just leave you here with a bullet in your leg. Infection will set in within a few days. You will be dead in a week. Or the coyotes might get you first. They like the smell of blood." The man with the red bandana broke first. Canyon de Chelly, South Rim. There is an old Anasazi ruin. That is where Cal holes up. Thank you, Logan said. He backed away toward his horse, keeping the rifle trained on them. The man he had struck was starting to stir. Logan had what he came for. He could leave now, but the wounded man's words echoed in his mind. The Garrett gang. If they were part of an organized gang, they might come looking for revenge. And Grace was alone at his cabin. Logan made a decision. He fired 3 more shots in quick succession, deliberately missing, but close enough to make the men dive for cover. Then he was on his horse and riding hard back the way he had come, the saddlebag secure and Grace's money intact. He pushed his roan mercilessly, stopping only to let the horse drink and blow. The moon was high when he finally saw the lights of his cabin in the distance, and relief flooded through him. Grace was all right. He dismounted and opened the door, and Grace was there with the rifle in her hands before he had taken 2 steps inside. "It is me," Logan said quickly. Grace lowered the rifle and Logan saw her hands were shaking. "Thank God," she said. "I heard you coming and I was not sure." "I have your money," Logan said, holding up the saddlebag. "All of it, I think." Grace took it from him and opened it, quickly counting the cuts. "It is all here," she said, and her voice cracked. "Logan, I cannot believe you did this. Thank you." "Thank you so much." "You are welcome," Logan said. He suddenly felt exhausted, the adrenaline of the day draining away. "But there is a problem. They were part of a gang, the Garrett gang. I do not think they will let this go." Grace's expression turned serious. "How many men in this gang?" "I do not know. The one I shot mentioned a camp at Canyon de Chelly. That is several days' ride from here. Then we have time to prepare," Grace said. "Or we could leave, go deeper into the mountains where they will not find us." Logan looked at her in surprise. "We?" Grace met his eyes steadily. "Do you think I am going to abandon you after you risked your life to recover my money? We are in this together now, Logan Quinn." Something warm unfurled in Logan's chest at her words. "Together," he repeated. "Together," Grace confirmed. "Now sit down and eat something. You look dead on your feet." Logan obeyed, too tired to argue. Grace moved around the cabin with surprising ease despite her injured arm, heating up stew and pouring coffee. They ate in companionable silence, and Logan found himself watching her, noticing the graceful efficiency of her movements, the way the firelight caught in her hair. "What are you thinking about?" Grace asked, catching him staring. "About how strange it is that you were my commanding officer, and now you are here in my cabin," Logan said honestly. Grace smiled slightly. "Life takes odd turns. 8 years ago, I never imagined I would be sitting in a mountain cabin with one of my former privates, planning how to defend against a gang of outlaws." "What did you imagine?" Logan asked, genuinely curious. Grace was quiet for a moment. "I thought I would stay in the army. Keep rising through the ranks, maybe make major or colonel. Stupid, I know. They were never going to let a woman do that. But I thought if I was good enough, if I proved myself enough times, maybe they would make an exception." "You were good enough," Logan said. "Better than most of the officers I served under. It did not matter in the end," Grace said, but he could hear the old bitterness in her voice. "My best was not enough to overcome what I was born as. Their loss," Logan said simply. Grace looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "You are a good man, Logan Quinn, better than you probably realize." Logan did not know what to say to that, so he just nodded and finished his coffee. Grace helped him spread out his bedroll by the fire, and they settled in for the night, Grace in the bed and Logan on the floor, but Logan found sleep elusive. He kept thinking about Grace's words, about the fact that she had been his captain and he had never known, about how she had fought in some of the bloodiest battles of the war and survived, about how she had been treated after her secret was discovered, and he thought about how right it felt to have her in his cabin, sharing his space, how the loneliness he had grown so accustomed to had lifted the moment she arrived. The next few days fell into a pattern. Grace's shoulder was healing well, though she still could not lift anything heavy. Logan continued his normal routines, checking his trap lines and hunting for fresh meat, but he stayed closer to the cabin than usual, never gone for more than a few hours at a time. They talked while they worked. Grace told him stories of the war, of battles and marches, and the men she had commanded. Logan told her about his years in the mountains, about tracking grizzlies and surviving blizzards, and the profound peace of watching the sun rise over the peaks with no other human in sight. "Do you never get lonely?" Grace asked one afternoon as they sat outside the cabin, cleaning the rabbits Logan had snared that morning. "Sometimes," Logan admitted, "but I got used to being alone. It is better than being with people who do not understand you. I know what you mean, Grace said softly. After I was discharged, I felt like I did not belong anywhere. Too masculine for women's company, not allowed in men's company. Neither one thing nor the other. Logan looked at her, at the way the sunlight brought out the gold in her hair, at the strength in her hands as she worked. You belong here, he said, if you want to stay. Grace's hands stilled. Logan, I cannot impose on you forever. It is not an imposition, Logan said. I am offering. The cabin is big enough for two, and it would be good to have someone to talk to. Someone who understands what? What it is like to be a soldier. What it is like to have seen things that most people cannot imagine. What it is like to be different from everyone else. Grace was silent for a long moment. Then she said quietly, I would like that, but Logan, you need to understand something. I am not a conventional woman. I cannot cook fancy meals or sew or do any of the things women are supposed to do. I can shoot and track and survive in the wilderness, but I cannot be what most men expect a woman to be. Good, Logan said. I do not want a conventional woman. I want a partner, someone who can stand beside me, not behind me. Grace's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You really mean that? I do not say things I do not mean, Logan said. Grace set down her knife and reached across the space between them, taking his hand in hers. Then yes, I will stay, for as long as you will have me. Logan closed his large hand around hers, feeling the calluses on her palm that matched his own. Good, he said again, and allowed himself a rare smile. They finished cleaning the rabbits and hung them in the smokehouse Logan had built behind the cabin. The afternoon was warm, the sky a perfect cloudless blue, and Logan felt a contentment he had not experienced in years, maybe ever. But that peace was shattered 3 days later when Logan returned from checking his northernmost trap line to find two men on horses approaching his cabin. He spurred his roan into a gallop, his hand on his rifle, but as he drew closer he saw Grace standing in the doorway with her own rifle. Calm and ready, the men reined in as Logan arrived, and he positioned his horse between them and the cabin. Can I help you? Logan asked, his voice flat. The first man, middle-aged with a weathered face and a marshal's star pinned to his vest, held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. Easy now. I am Marshal Tom Reeves out of Farmington, and this is Deputy Hayes. We are tracking the Garrett gang. Word is they had some trouble up this way a few days ago, and we are following up. Logan relaxed slightly but kept his rifle ready. What kind of trouble? 3 of Garrett's men got roughed up in Largo Canyon. One of them took a bullet in the leg. They said a mountain man ambushed them and stole their money. They shot a woman and robbed her in Aztec, Logan said evenly. I got her money back. They are lucky I did not kill them. Marshal Reeves nodded slowly. That tracks with what we heard in town. A Miss Sutton was treated by Doc Pierce for a gunshot wound. That her behind you? It is, Grace said, stepping forward. And everything Logan says is true. Those men shot me in broad daylight and stole $400 from me. Logan recovered it. I am not disputing that, Miss, Marshal Reeves said. But there is a complication. Cal Garrett does not take kindly to people messing with his gang. We have reason to believe he is planning to come after you both. That is why we are here. To warn you and to ask if you would be willing to testify against the men if we catch them. How many men does Garrett have? Grace asked. Last count, about 8 to 10. They have been robbing stagecoaches and supply trains between here and Durango. We have been after them for 6 months. Logan and Grace exchanged glances. 10 men was a serious threat, even for 2 experienced fighters. What are you suggesting? Logan asked. Come back to Farmington with us. We can protect you there, and once we have Garrett and his gang in custody, you can testify. Then you can go about your lives in peace. Logan felt his jaw tighten. Leave his cabin, his mountains, go hide in a town full of people. The idea made his skin crawl, but Grace said, Thank you, Marshal, but we will take our chances here. Logan knows this country better than anyone, and we can defend ourselves. Marshal Reeves looked between them, clearly unhappy with their decision. You are making a mistake. Garrett is ruthless. He has killed before, and he will kill again. We will be careful, Grace said firmly. But we are not running, the Marshal sighed. All right, but if you change your minds, you know where to find us. He tipped his hat and turned his horse. Deputy Hayes followed, and they rode away down the trail. Logan dismounted and walked over to Grace. You did not have to do that. You could have gone with them. You would have been safe, and leave you here alone to face 10 men? Grace shook her head. I told you, we are in this together. Besides, I am tired of running. I have been running in one way or another for 10 years. It is time to make a stand. Logan felt a surge of emotion so strong it almost knocked him back. This woman, this warrior, was choosing to stay with him, to fight beside him, even knowing the odds. Then we need to prepare, he said. If Garrett is coming, we need to be ready. Over the next few days, they turned the cabin into a fortress. Logan had always kept it defensible, with thick walls and a clear field of fire in all directions. But now they reinforced the door and shutters, stocked ammunition, and set up fighting positions with good cover. Grace's shoulder was healing well enough that she could handle a rifle with minimal pain, and Logan knew from watching her practice that she was an excellent shot. They also talked through strategy, planning for different scenarios. If Garrett attacked during the day, if he attacked at night, if he tried to burn them out, if he tried to wait them out. Grace's military training came to the fore, and Logan found himself following her lead without question. She might have been dishonorably discharged, but she was still every inch a captain. A week after the marshal's visit, Garrett came. It was just after dawn when Logan heard the horses. He was already awake, as he always was at first light, and he immediately woke Grace. "They are here," he said quietly. Grace was on her feet instantly, checking her rifle. "How many?" "I count 8 horses. Could be more on foot." They took their positions, Logan at the front window and Grace at the side. The cabin had been built into a hillside, so the back wall was protected by solid rock. The front and sides were exposed, but Logan had cleared the trees back 50 yards to prevent anyone from getting close unseen. The riders came into view, spread out in a loose semicircle. Logan recognized the 3 men from Largo Canyon, including the one he had shot, who was still favoring his leg. The man in the center on a big black horse had to be Cal Garrett. He was younger than Logan expected, maybe 30, with a hard face and cold eyes. "Logan Quinn," Garrett called out. "We need to talk." Logan opened the shutter slightly. "So talk. You took something that belongs to me, $400. I want it back, and I want the woman who shot one of my men. I shot your man because he and his friends shot a woman and robbed her," Logan shouted back. "The money belongs to her. It is back where it belongs." "That is not how I see it," Garrett said. "My boys took that money fair and square. You had no right to interfere." "Fair and square," Grace muttered beside Logan. "He actually said that. Come out and hand over the money and the woman, and we will let you live," Garrett continued. "You have my word." "Your word is worth about as much as spit," Logan called back. "You have 10 seconds to turn around and ride away before I start shooting." Garrett's expression turned ugly. "You are making a big mistake, Quinn. We will burn you out if we have to." "Try it," Logan shouted. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Garrett raised his hand and his men opened fire. Logan and Grace both dropped below the windows as bullets thudded into the thick log walls and shattered against the shutters. Logan had built well. The cabin could take a lot of punishment. He waited for the first volley to die down, then popped up and fired. One of Garrett's men cried out and tumbled from his horse. Grace was firing from the side window with deadly precision. Another man went down, then another. The range was long, nearly 50 yards, but Grace was making every shot count. Garrett and his remaining men retreated hastily out of rifle range, dragging their wounded with them. Logan counted 5 men still in the saddle, 3 down, but not necessarily dead. "Good shooting," Logan said. "You too," Grace replied, already reloading, "but they will try something else." Garrett does not look like the type to give up easily. She was right. For the next several hours, Garrett's men tried various approaches. They attempted to circle around and come at the cabin from the sides, but the lack of cover made them easy targets. They tried to get close enough to throw torches, but Logan and Grace drove them back with steady fire. They even tried to wait them out, but Logan had enough food and water stored to last for weeks if necessary. As the sun climbed higher, Logan began to think they might actually win this fight. They had the advantage of position-adequate supplies and superior marksmanship. Garrett was losing men and gaining nothing, but then Grace said quietly, "Logan, look." She was pointing toward the tree line to the south. Logan looked and felt his blood run cold. Smoke. Garrett had set fire to the forest. The wind was blowing toward the cabin. "That bastard," Logan said through gritted teeth. The fire would not reach the cabin directly, built as it was into the hillside, but the smoke would, and if the fire got big enough, it could trap them inside or force them out into the open where Garrett's men could pick them off. "We need to fight fire with fire," Grace said. "If we create a fire break between here and the main fire, it will burn itself out before it reaches us." Logan nodded. It was risky, requiring them to leave the safety of the cabin, but it was their best option. "I will do it. You cover me from the window." "Like hell," Grace said. "We both go." Faster that way, and we can watch each other's backs." There was no time to argue. They gathered the tools they needed and slipped out the side door. The smoke was already getting thicker, the crackling of flames audible in the distance. Logan began beating down the grass and brush in a wide arc around the cabin while Grace did the same on the other side, her injured shoulder clearly paining her but her face set with determination. A shot rang out, and splinters exploded from a tree trunk near Logan's head. Garrett's men had spotted them. Logan spun and fired back, buying time for Grace to complete her section. Another shot, closer this time. Logan felt the wind of it pass his cheek. "Done!" Grace shouted. "Get back inside!" They ran for the cabin as bullets kicked up dirt around their feet. Logan felt a searing pain across his ribs but did not slow down. They crashed through the door and slammed it shut behind them, both breathing hard. "You are hit," Grace said immediately, seeing the blood spreading across Logan's shirt. "Just a graze," Logan said, though it hurt like hellfire. "The firebreak will hold. Look." Through the window, they could see the flames reaching the cleared area and slowing, finding nothing to feed on. The main fire would burn for a while, but it would not reach the cabin. Garrett's plan had failed, and it seemed Garrett knew it. Through the smoke, Logan could see the remaining riders gathering, and then they turned and rode away. "They are leaving," Grace said in disbelief. "For now," Logan said, "but they will be back. Men like Garrett do not give up." But Garrett did not come back, not that day or the next or the one after that. A week later, Marshal Reeves returned with news. Garrett and his remaining men had been caught trying to rob a stagecoach outside Durango. There had been a shootout. Garrett was dead, along with 2 of his men. The rest were in custody. "It is over," the marshal said, sitting at Logan's table and accepting a cup of coffee. "You two can rest easy now." Logan looked at Grace, who was sitting beside him with her hand resting on his arm. Her shoulder had healed well, and the bruises on both of them from the fight had faded. They had survived. "Thank you for letting us know, Marshal," Grace said. After the marshal left, Logan and Grace stood on the porch, looking out at the mountains. The fall colors were starting to show, golden red among the green. "So what happens now?" Logan asked quietly. "What do you mean?" "I mean the danger is over. You are healed. You have your money. You could go anywhere, do anything." Grace turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "Logan Quinn, I thought I made myself clear. I am staying here with you. If you will have me, I will have you," Logan said, his voice rough with emotion. "God, Grace, I will have you for as long as you will stay." "Forever then," Grace said, and stood on her toes to kiss him. Logan wrapped his arms around her, careful of her healing shoulder, and kissed her back with all the feeling he had been holding inside. She was strong and fierce and brave, and she had chosen him. Him, a rough mountain man with more scars than social graces. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Grace smiled up at him. "I love you, Logan. I think I started falling for you the moment you picked me up in the street and refused to let me be stubborn about accepting help." "I love you too," Logan said, the words feeling strange on his tongue but right, so right. "I think I started falling when you grabbed my hand in the doctor's office and held on like you were never going to let go." They stood together on the porch as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire, and Logan thought that maybe, just maybe, being alone was not the only way to find peace. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Logan's life. He and Grace fell into a comfortable partnership, each bringing their own skills to the daily work of mountain living. Grace proved to be as capable with a trapline as she was with a rifle, and she had a talent for tanning hides that produced leather finer than anything Logan had ever managed. He taught her the best fishing spots in the high lakes, and she taught him songs from the war years, bawdy marching tunes that made them both laugh until their sides hurt. They expanded the cabin, building an addition that gave them more space and a separate room for when they had visitors, though visitors were rare. Grace's trunk, which had sat unopened for weeks, turned out to contain not just books but also her old uniform and the captain's insignia she had worn. She showed them to Logan one night by the fire. "I kept them," she said softly, running her fingers over the worn blue fabric. "Even after everything, I could not bring myself to throw them away." "You earned them," Logan said. "You should be proud." "I am," Grace said. "But I am also proud of this, of us, of what we are building here." Winter came to the mountains, fierce and beautiful. The snows piled high, and there were days when they could not leave the cabin at all, when the world outside was nothing but white. But inside, there was warmth and laughter and love. Logan had never been much for talking, but with Grace he found words coming easier. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing their pasts and their hopes for the future. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling softly outside and the fire burning bright, Logan asked Grace to marry him. He did not have a ring, but he had carved a small wooden box from pine, smooth and perfect, and inside he had placed a silver locket he had bought on his last trip to Aztec. "It is not much," he said, feeling suddenly nervous, "but I want you to know that this is forever, you and me together." Grace's eyes filled with tears as she opened the box. "Logan, it is perfect." And yes, of course, yes. They were married in Aztec in early March, when the snows had melted enough to make the trip down from the mountains. Dr. Pierce stood as witness, along with Marshal Reeves and his wife. It was a simple ceremony, but when Logan slipped a gold band onto Grace's finger and she did the same for him, he felt something settle in his chest, a rightness he had been searching for his whole life without knowing it. They returned to the cabin as husband and wife, and life continued its gentle rhythm. Spring brought new life to the mountains. Grace discovered she was pregnant in late April, and Logan felt a joy so profound it scared him. He had never thought he would be a father, had never imagined holding a child of his own. "Are you happy?" Grace asked him one evening as they sat on the porch, her hand resting on the small swell of her belly. "Happier than I knew it was possible to be," Logan said honestly. He covered her hand with his own, marveling at the life growing beneath their palms. "I cannot believe this is real sometimes, that you are real, that this is our life." "Believe it," Grace said, leaning against his shoulder. "We fought for this. We earned it." Their son was born in December, during a week when the world seemed hushed and holy with new snow. Grace labored for 12 hours, and Logan stayed beside her the whole time, his hand in hers giving her his strength. When the baby finally came, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Logan wept for the first time since he was a boy. "What should we name him?" Grace asked, exhausted but glowing. "You choose," Logan said, unable to take his eyes off the tiny face. "Lucas," Grace said softly. "Lucas Quinn, after his father." Logan looked at her in surprise. "My name is Logan." "I know," Grace said with a tired smile. "But Lucas was the name I almost chose for you when we first met. It just suits him, I think." Little Lucas proved to have his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. He was a healthy, happy baby, and Logan discovered reserves of gentleness in himself he had never known existed. This tiny human depended on him, trusted him, and Logan vowed he would never let him down. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Lucas grew strong and curious, learning to walk on sturdy legs that carried him all over the cabin and surrounding area. Grace taught him his letters, and Logan taught him to track and hunt and respect the wilderness. When Lucas was 4, a daughter joined the family, Emma, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. The cabin expanded again to accommodate their growing family. Logan built a proper bedroom for the children, with bunk beds he carved himself and a window that looked out at the mountains. He added a larger porch where they could all sit together in the evenings, watching the sunset and listening to the wind in the pines. Grace continued to work as a guide occasionally, taking parties of surveyors or naturalists into the backcountry for good pay. Logan never worried when she was gone. He knew she could take care of herself better than most men, and she always came back to him, to their children, to the life they had built together. When Lucas was 8 and Emma was 4, they took the children down to Aztec for the summer festival. It was a rare trip for them. The mountains were their home, and they rarely felt the need to venture into town. But the children deserved to see other people, to eat candy and watch the fireworks and play with other children their ages. They were standing near the main stage watching a band play when an old man approached them. He was bent with age, his hair white, but his eyes were sharp as he studied Logan's face. "Logan Quinn?" the man said uncertainly. Logan turned, trying to place the face. "Yes, I thought it was you. I am Samuel Pritchard. We served together at Fort Union." Memory came flooding back. Pritchard had been a corporal, a good man, steady under pressure. "Sam," Logan said, shaking his hand. "I remember. It has been years. 18 years. Pritchard agreed. He looked at Grace with interest. "And who is this lovely lady?" "My wife, Grace," Logan said with pride. "Grace, this is Sam Pritchard. We served together." Grace shook his hand politely, but Logan saw recognition flicker in Pritchard's eyes as he looked at her more closely. "Captain Sutton," Pritchard said slowly. "My God, it is you. I heard rumors after you left, but I never knew what happened to you." Grace stiffened slightly, and Logan moved closer to her, a protective instinct. But Pritchard was smiling. "You were the best officer I ever served under, Captain," he said. "And I served under a lot of them. It was a damn shame what they did to you. Pardon my language. You deserved better." "Thank you, Sam," Grace said quietly. "That means more than you know." They talked for a while, catching up on old times and old friends. Pritchard had retired from the army and now ran a small ranch outside town. He spoke to Grace with respect and to Logan with the easy camaraderie of men who had served together, and by the time they parted ways, Grace was smiling. "That was nice," she said, as they walked back toward where they had left their wagon. "I had forgotten that not everyone thought poorly of me." "No one who really knew you could think poorly of you," Logan said firmly. He picked up Emma, who was getting tired, and settled her on his shoulders. Lucas walked between them, holding his mother's hand. They stayed in town for 3 days, enjoying the festival and seeing people they knew. Dr. Pierce, now quite elderly, examined the children and pronounced them extraordinarily healthy. Marshall Reeves, also retired, shared drinks with Logan and told stories that made Grace laugh. It was good, Logan thought, to be part of a community again, even if only briefly, but it was better to return to their mountain home. As they climbed the trail toward the cabin, with the children chattering excitedly about everything they had seen, Logan felt the familiar peace settle over him. This was where they belonged. That night, after the children were asleep, Logan and Grace sat on the porch as they so often did. The stars were brilliant overhead and the night air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke. "Do you ever regret it?" Logan asked. "Giving up your old life, living up here away from everything?" Grace looked at him with such love in her eyes that it made his breath catch. "Not for one single second. This is the life I was meant to have, Logan. With you, with our children, with these mountains. I spent so many years trying to be something I was not, trying to fit into a world that did not want me. Here I can just be myself. I can be Grace Quinn, wife and mother and guide and woman who was once a captain and is proud of it." "I am proud of you too," Logan said. "Every single day. And I am proud of you," Grace said, taking his hand. "My mountain man, my husband, my partner in everything." They sat in comfortable silence, and Logan thought about the long and winding path that had brought them here. From that dusty street in Aztec where Grace had been shot, to this porch where they sat as husband and wife, parents, partners in building a life together. It seemed impossible that it had only been 6 years. It felt like forever and no time at all. The years continued their gentle march. Lucas grew into a young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's sharp mind and way with words. He talked of becoming a lawyer, of fighting for justice for people who had none. Grace and Logan supported him, proud of the man he was becoming. Emma proved to be a talented artist, sketching the mountains and wildlife with a skill that amazed her parents. She was quieter than her brother, but with a steel core that reminded Logan of Grace in her army days. When Emma was 10, another baby joined the family, a boy they named Daniel. He completed their family, the final piece of a puzzle they had not known they were assembling. Grace was 42 when Daniel was born, and the pregnancy was harder than the others had been. Logan worried constantly, but Grace faced it with her usual fierce determination. When Daniel arrived, healthy and howling, Logan held his wife and thanked every god he could name that she was all right. "No more," Grace said tiredly, but with a smile. 3 is plenty. 3 is perfect," Logan agreed. Life in the mountains continued its rhythm, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Logan took Lucas on his first solo hunt when the boy was 12, a week-long expedition into the high country. They returned with a young elk and stories that would be told for years. Emma painted a portrait of her family that hung over the fireplace, capturing something essential about each of them that made Grace cry when she first saw it. When Lucas was 16, he announced he wanted to go to school back east to get a proper education. It was hard to let him go, but Logan and Grace knew it was the right thing. They took him to the train station in Durango, and Grace hugged him fiercely. "Make us proud," she said. "I will," Lucas promised, "and I will come back. This will always be home." He kept that promise, returning every summer to help with the work and tell them about his studies. He wrote letters regularly, and Grace read them aloud by the fire in the evenings. Emma went away to art school in Santa Fe when she turned 18, and suddenly the cabin felt too large with just Daniel and his parents. But it was a good emptiness, Logan thought. They had raised their children well, given them the tools to make their own ways in the world. And they always came back, bringing spouses and eventually grandchildren to meet the legendary mountain man and his captain wife. Logan was 58 when his first grandchild was born, a daughter of Lucas's named Grace after her grandmother. He held the tiny baby in his massive, scarred hands and marveled at the circle of life. at how far he had come from that lonely private at Fort Union who thought he would never have anyone to call his own. Grace was 60 when she finally stopped taking guided expeditions into the backcountry. Her joints ached more than they used to, and the long days in the saddle were harder to recover from. But she did not stop moving, did not stop living. She and Logan took long walks through the mountains they loved, moving slower now but still covering miles, still finding joy in the beauty around them. They talked often about the early days, about that afternoon in Aztec when their lives had collided in dust and blood and violence. About the moment Logan had lifted Grace into his arms and carried her to the doctor, not knowing he was carrying his future. About the revelation that she had been his commanding officer, and how that fact had changed nothing about the way he saw her, the way he loved her. "Do you remember what you said to me?" Grace asked one evening as they sat on the porch. Both of them with silver in their hair and lines on their faces earned through years of laughter and love. "When you found out I had been Captain Sutton, I said it was the Army's loss," Logan replied, the memory clear despite the decades between. "You did," Grace said softly. "And that was the moment I knew. That was when I understood that you saw me, really saw me, for who I was and not what I had been or what people expected me to be." "I have always seen you," Logan said. "From the first moment. You were extraordinary then and you are extraordinary now." "We are extraordinary together," Grace corrected. "That is the truth of it." Logan could not argue with that. They were extraordinary together. Two broken pieces that had found each other and created something whole, something strong, something that had lasted decades and would last until the end. Their end came peacefully as they had lived. Logan passed first in his sleep one winter night, with Grace beside him as she had been for nearly 40 years of marriage. He was 73, and he died in the cabin he had built, surrounded by the mountains he loved and the family he had never imagined he would have. Grace followed him 6 months later, her heart simply giving out one morning as she sat on the porch watching the sunrise. She was 71, and her children found her there, peaceful and still, with a smile on her face. They buried her next to Logan on the hillside above the cabin, under a pine tree they had planted together on their first anniversary. The headstones were simple, carved by their grandson who had learned stonework, Logan Quinn, 1845–1918, mountain man, soldier, husband, father. Grace Sutton Quinn, 1847–1918, captain, guide, wife, mother. Below Grace's name, Lucas had added one more line. She outranked him, but they led together. The cabin still stands on its hillside, maintained now by their descendants, who come in the summer to walk the trails Logan carved and sit on the porch where Grace and Logan spent so many evenings. The mountains remember them, as mountains remember all those who love them truly, and sometimes on quiet evenings when the wind is just right, visitors to the cabin swear they can hear voices, a man's deep rumble and a woman's clear laughter, echoing down from the high peaks where two souls who found each other against all odds, still walk together, still lead together, still love together forever.